Hi everyone and welcome to this week's coding video. On today's lesson, I want my students to go ahead and differentiate the differences between compare and contrast. This is the goal that I would like my students to accomplish within their code. Throughout this, they could be as creative as they'd like and choose as many sprites and backgrounds as they please. But throughout this lesson, I'm going to show you all how to use two actors, how to use a loop function, using an if-then statement, and how to create our variable for our program. Now, I know this seems very overwhelming at first, but not to worry, by the end of this video, we are going to go ahead and become a pro at this. So let's go ahead and get started. Initially, I would want my students to go ahead and be given this initial program here to use. If we zoom into this one here, when the green flag is clicked, I went ahead and added a forever statement. Now, whatever's in this forever statement is always going to occur as long as that once that green flag is clicked. And it looks as though when the key up arrow is pressed, it's going to switch to costume up. Now, the costume up is only designed for this beetle, and in this case, we see that there's different costumes, or in this case, different locations that the beetle would be positioned to. So we see the right, up, left, down. So in this one, when the up arrow on our keyboard is pressed, then it's going to switch to the costume up and change Y by 4. Now our XY variable is here all designed to wherever, I guess in this case, the beetle is moving to. So when it's moving up, it's going to change its location by Y by 4. So let's go ahead and see if this is true. So like I mentioned, we're going to learn about compare and contrast. So it's just introducing it. And we do see that. However, if we go ahead and move the left or right or down arrow, we don't see any movement. So we want to go ahead and add that movement. So let's go ahead and stop that. Now, since we know that this is almost a similar code for the other ones, I'm actually going to go ahead and move this out. Go ahead and add that in there. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is actually duplicate it just to save more time. Our down arrow now is actually going to be the opposite. So instead of positive 4, it is now going to be negative 4. All right. Instead of up, it's actually going to be down. So now we've created those, and we want to duplicate this. However, although these two may be correct because of the y, we now have to manipulate that x variable. So instead of change y by 4, when I want to change that x by 4. And same thing, let's go ahead and see that to the right. Same thing, let's go ahead and duplicate that. Almost forgot this guy here. All right, now we're going to go ahead and move this to the left, and negative 4. Perfect. So let's go ahead and link everything together with our if-then statements. All right. By adding these if-then statements into our forever, we are now creating what's called a loop. A loop is just, it's always going to constantly occur. You know, it's an endless cycle. So let's go ahead and see if we mastered this part. So today we're going to learn about compare and contrast. All right, perfect. And we see now that if we move up, down, left, right, it's able to go ahead and navigate very smoothly. New background. Compare means the same. Contrast is the difference. So we're going to go ahead and give a new scenario. So we then see now that 2 cars are now being located, as well as a no yes. So let's see what happens when we navigate to each car.
This car is blue.
All right, we know, I went ahead and added that little audio there. Again, students can go ahead and change whatever they please, take it off, or add a new fact to the car. Question time, can you compare that they are both the same color? Click yes or no. So knowing this, both cars are not the same color, but let's go ahead and see what happens when we click yes. All right. Oh no, try again. And like I mentioned, there is a situation with the time. I would want also my students to go ahead and change that problem, dilemma going on. So now we are in a different backdrop and with a new different scenario where we have two circles, one of compare and one of contrast with four new little sprites here. Alright, so the goal of this background is to go ahead and move the correct sprite in the correct circle. What we see here is we have a starfish, a butterfly, another butterfly, and a fish. Knowing now that there are two butterflies, we can then say that they belong in the compare. But excuse me, let's go ahead and see what happens if the butterfly is then dragged across to the contrast. Nothing really, because we don't have any code. So our goal of this is to go ahead and use another if-then statement to go ahead and fix this dilemma here going on. So we know that this butterfly does not belong in the contrast bubble. So what we ideally would want is when the butterfly is dragged across to this bubble, it should glide back to its initial position. So what we're going to go ahead and do is add another if-then statement. So let's go ahead and do that. So if touching, and I want the contrast bubble, so in this case it's sprite 4. If touching sprite 4, let's go ahead and add that if-then statement. We want it to glide back to where its initial position is. And what's nice is once we put that location of the butterfly, it actually already sets it up in our motion. So we want it to just to glide back. And we want to let the audience or whoever's viewing it know that this is incorrect and to try again. So we're going to go to our looks and say, oh no, try again for 2 seconds. And let's go ahead and add that on there. Now, as before, I want this to forever happen no matter what the situation is. So I'm also going to add in forever loop there as well. Now we know that this does not belong in the contrast. The goal of the end is for the butterfly to go ahead and to go into the compare. So similar to this one, actually, I am going to add another if-then statement. And again, I want it in this forever loop to constantly happen. So if, in this time, if touching, this is sprite 3, I would want, let's see, I want a cheering sound. And cheering does not look to be appearing on here, so we need to add it on here. I believe it's under human. Play sound cheer until done. And then we want to stop all, because if not, then it's just going to constantly play throughout this whole time that the player is playing this. And we're going to just go ahead and add it on here. So let's go ahead and test this. I believe we would have to then push that green button again, which initially it's going to take us back to the beginning, which isn't a problem. Let's see here. Alright, so compare means the same as we mentioned before. Alright, so we now know what's going to happen. The cars are going to appear. Alright, there's 2 cars. If we click yes, there's telling us to try again. However, if we click no, we know that that's the correct answer. Alright. Alright, question time. Alright. And like I said, my students can be able to maybe manipulate the time, if not just get rid of this background and add a different one, different scenario. Alright, let's go ahead and test this out. Alright, contrast. Yep, nope, try. Now we know that this works. So we want the same thing occurring for both the butterfly, which I've already provided here. But again, I would go ahead and take this off for my students to kind of figure out what the following steps would be. So ideally, we would want this to go contrast, and the beetle would actually stay here outside of the compare and contrast bubbles. Ideally, this would be that end result for the students to go ahead and accomplish. they would then be assigned to create another backdrop with another example of compare and contrast. And that is really as creative as they can be. They can choose any loop, if then loop, any variable, and so on and so forth. And now what is all left to show you all is how to use a variable within our program. Now, to create a variable, it is located here within our data. And our variable, we can choose whatever we'd please, but we do want to name it similar to what it stands for. So if we do a timer, we want to go ahead and name it timer. If we want to do hunger, we want to name it under hunger. In this case, let's go ahead and name our variable what to say, because this is actually what our variable is going to stand for. And from here we have that option if we want it for all sprites or for the sprite only. For the time being, we do want it for all of our sprites. Now in our what to say variable, I do want this to be manipulated within what the beetle is initially saying within the compare and contrast, which is found right here. When you compare something, it means the same. When you contrast, you find the differences. I wanted to either then say one or the other. And you do see here now that what to say is mentioned and located here in our background. We couldn't change. If we unclick it here, it'll go ahead and hide. So it's up to you if you wanted to show it or not. In this case, I wouldn't want it to show it. So let's go ahead and see here. All right, so it's time to manipulate our programming here, coding. All right, so we're going to go ahead and set what to say. Set what to say to, and we want to say one or the other now. I wouldn't want now to say both. Then again, this would be then a final, kind of more so in the final lessons of the students being able to know what the differences between each one, compare and contrast, are. So if then and let's go ahead and see. We'd go to our operators, and we're now going to pick a number 1 to 2 because it's either option 1 or 2 that we're going to have. We're going to go ahead and add it on there. All right, so we're going to set it to what to say. All right, so now again, we're actually going to add another if-then statement. And within our if-then statement, let's go ahead and do back to our operators here. All right, our if-then statement equals 1. And we're going to go back to what to say. So if our what to say equals 1, then we're going to say, let's chop this up a little. You're going to say that. When you contrast, you find the difference. And, sorry. All right, and we're actually going to duplicate this because we're going to do that same thing. However, when we say it to 2, we're actually going to say, so are you ready? Wait, actually, compare means the same. I knew I was missing something. We're going to move this around. All right, so compare means the same. When you contrast, you find the difference. And this was actually one of the duplicates, so we're going to delete that. So, are you ready to compare and contrast? Is I'm going to say that. Perfect. So let's go ahead and see if this works out. Let's go ahead and play it. And again, like the same thing as the past, it's going to go to its initial programming, which is that first background. All right. Compare means the same. So in this case, it went with option 2. So we know it works. And like I said, our variables, we can change it to whatever we'd please. So the students can choose level ups, health. There's multiple and endless amounts of variable options you could use. Perfect, and then now we have it. If any of my students do have any questions, I would be around to go ahead and answer any questions or suggestions, as well as put my opinion in what they have. Ideally, I would want my students to add comments to suggest why they added certain variables or certain blocks here to their preference. Thank you for watching.